Middlesex County. Over the past 30 plus years, KMM has worked diligently and effectively to try to reduce traffic congestion and improve the air quality for the residents of Middlesex County and all of New Jersey. We have been proponents and strong advocates for electric vehicle usage. Anybody who's involved in this COVID-19 and the pandemic that's going on, by just the number of people who've been having to work from home or not having to go to their jobs, you can see the cleaner air in New Jersey. You can see the bluer skies and a nicer sunset because the electric vehicles are not the predominant use of vehicles in New Jersey. We're still dependent upon fossil fuels for so many different things and so many different ways to get around. And I think when we look into the future, remember the prologue, our past is our future. Although Thomas Edison and a variety of other people have invented electric vehicles at the turn of the 20th century, as we turn into the 21st century, we need to look at electric vehicles a lot more seriously and a lot more comprehensively, as that is our future. And we are very fortunate in New Jersey here to have proponents to make this a possibility. This type of possibility is only going to occur with leadership from the top and support from the bottom. So those people who are looking to buying new vehicles, those people who are looking to try to save our environment, those people who really see that there's a really good need, and not only a good need, but a good way to provide transportation for you and your family, will look at electric vehicles as the future. We have our guest tonight. We have Tom Moloughney from the Plug-in America, which is a national nonprofit organization providing information and promotion of electric vehicles. Their efforts for many years has been to make electric vehicles a reality in our state. But beyond that, the leadership we're talking about is our Assemblyman Dan Benson. Assemblyman Benson, as the chairman of the Transportation Committee for the Assembly and a member of the Budget Committee, and he's also a member of the Health and Senior Services Committee. Assemblyman Benson, since 2011, has been a leader in the state in providing how the future can really look better for all of New Jersey residents. So we want to thank you both for coming here today to talk about the future of electric vehicles and how those type of programs can really make New Jersey not only a leader in the state, but also one of the providers of one of the great programs that we can make the environment cost-effective ways to provide transportation for the state. So I think we want to start at the beginning with Tom. Give us a little history about electric vehicles and your usage. I know you've been on our program before when we had a St. Peter's hospital a couple of years ago talking about it. We're basically talking about how municipalities, towns, state, everything else has to build charging stations to get rid of some of this range anxiety that people may have. Things have changed over the last couple of years in dramatic ways. So give us a little background there so we can go ahead and see how we can lead in the future.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on, Bill. And yeah, things have changed a lot since we last talked. As you mentioned, I've been driving electric vehicles here in the state of New Jersey for a long time now. I've been driving electric cars full-time since 2009 and have driven about 300,000 miles on my electric cars in the last 11 years. Most of my electricity that was used in those cars come from the solar array on my roof. So they're true zero emission miles. You know, as Bill mentioned, one of the things that we need to have happen for electric vehicle proliferation is better infrastructure.
But Tom, let me interrupt you for a second, because one of the arguments that we hear about electric vehicles, of course, if you don't have solar panels on your roof, you're basically plugging into the infrastructure and the whole system that's producing electricity. Wouldn't that create more pollution than necessarily for, if you have an electric vehicle that produces less pollution, aren't you producing electricity that's even more?
So you're true. That's correct. Your energy, whatever energy you use, is only as clean as the source. So plugging into the grid isn't as good as plugging into my solar array, but that doesn't mean that it's not better. You know, you don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. There's been many studies done and proven that electric vehicles are cleaner in every category, every instance when compared to a fossil fuel burning car. There's some good information on the Department of Energy website where you can compare, you can enter your zip code where you live, and it will tell you how much carbon emissions you'll have based on your zip code. So they actually take into consideration the electricity mix where you live, whether it's 40% natural gas or 10% renewable. So you can actually get a real readout of your carbon emissions if you drove a gas car, a plug-in hybrid car, or an electric car. And in every instance, even in states like Kentucky, where it's 100% coal-powered electricity, that's the worst electricity you can get, is coal-powered electricity. Even in those states, the electric car is as clean as the best gas car, like a hybrid that gets 50 miles per gallon. So that whole argument about, the long tailpipe and your car is plugged into the power plant, it's true. They're not zero emission if you're using grid energy, but they're still always cleaner than a gas car.
But in New Jersey here, we're actually way ahead of the curve in that. I mean,
Absolutely.
New Jersey isn't Kentucky. We're not getting all our electricity from the coal anymore. We've kind of eliminated a lot of the coal production for our electricity.
Absolutely. I was giving you the worst case scenario, which is like in Kentucky and I think North Dakota. Here in New Jersey, a lot of our electricity is renewable, but most of it is natural gas, which is a clean, quote unquote, clean fossil fuel, much better than coal.
Which is why I brought you back to a better source, because in New Jersey here, we realize one of the problems we face in New Jersey with our dirty air comes from places like the coal-fired furnaces that are existing in Pennsylvania, Ohio, even Kentucky somewhat. I mean, even the last couple of days, we've managed to see the cloudy skies, not from our lack of sunshine. It comes from the fires that are in California. So we know these type of things are creating issues for our environment. So what we can do in New Jersey here, obviously with electric vehicles, will make a big difference. And I think one of the issues that you're facing, of course, is the which we talked about earlier, the range anxiety. Okay, you're gonna have to help me. How many numbers of vehicles are being produced right now by all of the car manufacturers who understand the future as much as we should expect? Car manufacturers look years down the road, and we have as consumers have to understand that they understand things better than we do.
Absolutely. One of the things that I get to take advantage of, I'm also a staff writer for Inside EVs. So I get to interview and speak with product managers for all of the existing auto manufacturers. I get to see a snapshot of what they're producing over the next 5 to 7 years, so I can write about it. And as many electric cars are available today, and there's over 30 plug-in electric cars available in the state of New Jersey right now. Many people don't realize that.
It's just not Tesla, huh? We always hear it's just Tesla.
Exactly.
Well, they're the marketing thing.
They're the biggest boy. They're the biggest player. They've got the big name. But there's over 30 electric vehicles available today in New Jersey. But as much as that sounds, by 2023 to 2025, we are going to have literally hundreds of models of electric cars available in New Jersey dealerships. So the adoption curve that's been very gradual over the last 10 years, we're just about at that hockey stick point where it's going to do this. And in 2023 to 2025, what we're going to see is unlike anything we've seen in the past. That inflection point's going to hit. The cost of the batteries is going to be just a little bit lower than it is now. The infrastructure is going to be in place, and we're just going to see an incredibly quick transition to electric vehicles.
I guess the manufacturers can see the obsolescence of fossil fuels. I mean, they don't look 6 months down the road. They're looking at how things can actually change as a society, because we need to. I mean, climate change is not a joke. It's not a hoax. We know that these type of things have to be changed when there's so much of the environment is being damaged by fossil fuels and consumption by drivers of non-electric vehicles. And I think you're right. When the manufacturers look at that, we can see that. What's fortunate for us in New Jersey here is that we are not behind the curve too much. We are actually moving forward to understand that. I mean, our state government has already made all kinds of proposals with the BPU and different types of programs and rebate programs. And the leadership on the state has been really effective in so many ways. We're lucky that Assemblyman Benson, you want to talk about the programs beyond your own programs, talk about the programs the state, the Governor Murphy is putting in place, the BPU is putting in place, and then we'll get some specifics about how you can do these things to make it actually hit home right in your own local hometown.
Yeah, no, it's been wonderful. The governor has an EV goal, and working with Senator Bob Smith and myself and Assemblywoman Nancy Pinkin, we put legislation together that not only set goals of 330,000 EVs on the road by 2025.
And right now we have how many? 300,000 is a really realistic goal because we have about what, 80,000 right now?
Yeah, and to get to that goal, it's giving $5,000 right on the sticker price, whether you buy or lease the car. It's about $250 per mile for that range. So we're incenting a higher range for the vehicles that we're purchasing. We're capping it at a car that has that 55,000 MSRP. So it's kind of encouraging Tesla to make sure they're offering something in that range of the market, but also make sure we're not just giving money out to folks that are probably going to buy this type of vehicle anyway.
Because if you buy an electric vehicle in New Jersey, there's no sales tax on it, right?
Correct. And so what now the big push is we got to make sure that we attack that range anxiety. And so in that bill, there is two really important things. Through the goal, Governor Murphy is working with the DEP, DOT, the toll authorities, and the BPU to do a strong mapping exercise to say, okay, where do we need these charging stations to get the best bang for our buck? Using some of the Volkswagen settlement and using some other monies in clean energy, we're going to help incent to make sure that we get at least some. Now, the private market's going to be dumping more of this in. In fact, Electrify America, which is kind of Volkswagen on their own commitments to install, are doing some. And then there's a whole host of other charging, like ChargePoint and other groups that are all out there trying to figure out their marketplace, their place in the market. And so we're already seeing that happen. But the other place where we really need to help is at the home.
Before you go where you're going to the next level, I think the Volkswagen settlement, people don't completely understand what that's all about. That really was something that's structured nationally has made a big difference. And when we look at what car manufacturers have to face the reality. So the Volkswagen settlement, can you give us a little background on that?
Sure. A number of years ago, Volkswagen was found that they were modifying the software for the emissions in their vehicles so that when they were being tested and everything else, it was saying that they were putting out less pollution than they really were. So when they got caught, this was an international scandal. And the leadership at Volkswagen made a pledge that they were going to do right, whether forced to or because of, again, it really had damaged their brand. And they've kind of really come to be out in the market saying we're going to try to lead as much as possible, not just with vehicles and not just with these settlements that are happening at different state levels. Again, because essentially every state was lied to by Volkswagen. And so they gave a settlement an amount of money that we can now use to incent many of these charging stations. But in addition to that, some of the commitments that
George Carlin always said that America was founded by settlers, okay? They all started for California. When they got to Tulsa, they said, well, we'll settle for this, okay? So I think this type of settlement actually makes a difference in terms of actually funding some of these programs that are really necessary to clean our air. And I think it's
and they took their own
only a
goals
settlement,
for
at the same time, it's a good thing.
Yeah, and so, but the key thing is where I was headed was to say, but we also now need to make sure, because over 90% of the charging, because of the extra range now in these vehicles with over 200 miles or higher range per full charge, we need to make sure folks have the ability to easily charge in their home. And so we're pushing, and in fact, the governor just signed another bill by Assemblywoman Nancy Pinkin and myself and others, that when there's new home developments, that they give the option to make sure that there's that charging station. But even if you can't charge overnight, say you have a level 2 charger, something that's a little bit more basic, you're still gonna be able to charge at least 30% each night to your car. And most people, if they're just commuting, aren't gonna even use up that full range. Well, so it's important to educate consumers.
We don't fill a gas tank every night, okay? Nobody goes out and gets gasoline every day, okay? And if you're gonna have a 300-mile range on your car with electric vehicles and you're only going 20 miles, you don't need to plug it in every night. You know what I mean? It doesn't seem necessary that you have to worry about range anxiety. And especially when the vehicles will show you how much time you have left and how much mileage you have left. You can obviously plug it in every couple of days and feel really secure. You're not going to run out of electricity any more than you're going to run out of fuel when your tank is half full. You're going to be okay.
But for those that want to have that feeling, the BPU right now, as part of the initial legislation that we passed, is putting together a incentive to just help pay a little bit of that cost if you did want to get a more fast charger in your home. So that'll be out there too. And I think that's important because there are going to be folks, unfortunately, when we get to batteries, we don't think of gasoline cars, we think of our cell phones. And getting that education and that culture change, people feel if they sleep and they forgot to plug in their vehicle, which no electric owner does. But even if they did, they're still going to be able to drive their car the next day in most cases. And then they probably would have enough to get themselves to a fast charger if they really felt that they had to go for a long trip. So some of this is just kind of building a better culture of EV understanding, educating folks, putting enough of those stations out, as I mentioned, that roadmap of stations, so that people feel like, okay, even if I run out, I have a place I can stop and charge up in a very quick manner.
Well, I remember I was at a conference where somebody asked a question about the danger of having a battery in your car, worried about the battery exploding. And the person who was doing the presentation said, well, we've all accepted the fact for over 100 years that it's okay to drive around with 20 gallons of gasoline under your seat, okay? I mean, so that's kind of ridiculous to talk about the danger of a battery compared to gasoline. And I think those kind of things can be resolved with confidence of people when they realize not only are the cars urban or clear for the environment, they also perform really well. I mean, that's the other part that's important. You're not running your electric lawnmower anymore. You're actually running a car that's very efficient and very effective and actually produces really good performance. I'm going to go back to Tom talking about production, or the ability of his cars to produce on the roads. Are you worried when you're merging onto exit 18, exit 9 on the turnpike? And getting off of Route 18, and all of a sudden you have to accelerate? What's going to happen if the gasoline fuel injection doesn't kick in, Tom?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that I think a lot of a stigma that electric cars had. I think Tesla did a lot to erase that stigma. But a lot of people, when they thought of electric cars, they thought about this like slow, wimpy, Prius type of a vehicle that would be unsafe to drive on the highway. I remember there's a Simpsons episode that Homer's driving an electric car, and it's just, you could run faster than it, and they just made fun of it, which is great. Simpsons is awesome. But the fact, it couldn't be any further from the truth. Electric cars are powerful, they're silent, they're smooth, they're much better performers than their gasoline counterparts. In fact, that's one of the things that really sold me on electric cars was that, I long said that incentives and people wanting to save the planet and cleaner air, that those are all going to happen, and they're great and byproducts of the electric car. But that's not what's going to really make people want to drive electric cars. People want to enjoy their vehicle. If it's not an enjoyable drive, many people just simply won't make the compromise. They most, I know they're better for the environment, but I want to enjoy my car. So the fact that electric cars are enjoyable, are better performance, are silent, silky smooth, just have a better overall driving experience, that's what convinced me that electric cars are our future. The fact that they're just better vehicles. And the instant torque, we love to say, just get, butts in seats. Get people to drive an electric car, and then all of a sudden they've got this big smile. We call it the EV grin. And that's why experiential events like what's happening right now, National Drive Electric Week, where people in non-COVID years have these great gatherings around the country and give thousands and thousands of test drives and let people be exposed to electric vehicles. Unfortunately, with COVID, many of the National Drive Electric Week events today are virtual, like what we're doing here. There are still some in-person events being held around the country. So if you're interested in driving an electric car, I'd urge you to go to the website driveelectric.org put in your zip code, see if there's any events nearby that will actually have test drives where you can get out there and test drive some of the electric cars. There are some in-person events this year, but typically in the past, we've had hundreds of thousands of test drives every year at hundreds of events. It's a fantastic event that we're having, that we hold annually. It's kind of like a national celebration of electric vehicles, and this is the either the 10th or the 11th year that we've had it.
Well, Keep Middlesex Moving is big on pedestrian safety. We've also encouraged putting trading cards and clothespins in the wheels so they're not so silent anymore, which is one of the pedestrian safety. But Assemblyman Benson actually is a sponsor of the bill for Electric Vehicle Week.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think Tom has it absolutely right. I tell people all the time, listen, even if you're not thinking about an EV now, and you're probably thinking, oh, I'll get one maybe in 5 or 10 years when they're everywhere. I tell folks, just go test drive one. And even if you're not looking to buy a car right now, just go test drive. Go to a dealership, say, hey, I'm interested in, what EVs do you have? And I guarantee you, the next time you're buying cars, you're going to look at EVs as well as part of your choice. And what's great about it is when you start looking at the savings on gas cost versus filling it up with electricity, you realize over the life of even 5 years, you're getting that payback where with a number of these vehicles, you're saving money for something comparable on gasoline. And that's why we put that $5,000 on the hood incentive, is to get you to realize, okay, we're going to try to get it to where it's comparable now, because we know with that, as Tom said, the battery prices dropping, and with gasoline prices going back up again, we're going to have that intersection. And when we talk about the grid, when you have the leadership of Governor Murphy, who says, I want 100% renewable by 2050, even if you're just looking at only new generation being renewable, you're now putting ourselves out that just at that point where we are hitting mass market penetration with EVs, we're going to have the greenest grid on the East Coast.
And not only gasoline savings, maintenance is also much lower. When you get an electric vehicle, your maintenance reductions are really important also. One of the things you talked about, Assemblyman, is one of the bills you've had passed, not only for, anybody who owns a single family home, of course, can plug it into their garage and have it work. But there's a lot of people who don't live in single family homes. So there's got to be some kind of incentive for people who live in multi-use type of developments, where there's apartments, complexes, or townhouse developments. What kind of incentives do we have there?
So this is a bill sponsored by myself and first primed by Assemblyman Gordon Johnson, who's been a great partner on this. And again, the Senate, almost all of this legislation is either sponsored by Senator Bob Smith or Senator Linda Greenstein, my running mate. It establishes standards to encourage the installation and use of EV charging stations in common interest communities. This is very similar. A lot of this we did with solar very early on, and that just kind of followed on what we did with when people wanted to put satellite dishes in their communities, and originally there was a lot of pushback. So, this is a very well-trod path, and we just got to make sure that when folks feel like that they don't have that right to be able to do something that's good for the whole community, we want to make sure that we break down some of those barriers. So what this bill does, it prohibits community associations from unreasonable restrictions of EV charging infrastructure, and ensures that charging infrastructure exists for homeowners and renters, knowing that that's critical to keeping a self-sustaining EV market. And so I think one of the really keys is making sure we're penetrating not just at the home, individual homes, but in these common interest communities. But because, again, we can't just do greenfield development. We'll never get to where we need to be. We got to go back and build in these places where there's no EV station charging right now.
And when we see these municipalities throughout the state doing redevelopment programs, and they're doing multi-use type of facilities and multi-type of development, it's important for the developer to understand that they can get bonuses if they reduce their parking thing, if they put in charging stations. Those are the kind of things that would actually reduce, because the people may not necessarily need 2 cars, they might necessarily need those type of programs. So I think this is a very proactive way to look at the future of how development can occur, providing access to charging stations. Communities can see that as an advantage, as an amenity to these type of complexes.
And we're trying to educate the developer community as well to say, okay, maybe you're not going to put the station in right now with this project, but make sure you run the conduit out to the parking areas. Make sure that you have that ability to just add that station, because that conduit and the make ready one is the most expensive part. If you have to go back and break up the concrete or break up the parking lot to then install it. In most cases, these developers are putting out conduit to put lighting in for parking lot lighting, using that same conduit and making sure there's some branches off to allow more charging stations, and making sure you have the right level of electricity going out to those areas really can make all the difference. This way, when you get a station installer that wants to come in, all they got to do is, take where that make ready work is, put the charging station installation in there, and work a little bit with the utility to make sure everything's right. But you don't have to worry about a lot of that disruption to the community and a lot of that kind of permitting and zoning issues that you may run into if you didn't do that already.
But you also see private developers working with the public, and also like shopping centers. I mean, when you look at the merchants, the commerce community, when they're looking at the businesses that they can attract people with electric vehicles to come to their shopping center or to their area, they're actually producing lots of charging stations throughout the state of New Jersey to make it possible for those cars to be able to charge. You can go into a store and plug your car in, do your shopping, come back out, and your car is filled up with electricity.
Yeah, there's a retail kind of group of folks that have large corporate campuses as well as retail. So folks like IKEA, Barnes and Noble, all of those, and if they're part of a larger group, I think it's Cirrus or Cerebus, the group, and they have their own commitments to making sure that anything that they have new and even retrofitting, that they are going to hit a number of charging stations for their workforce and for those that are shopping at their retail locations. So
you understand that from a commercial point of view, the retailers need all the business they can get. Okay, you provide an additional incentive, those type of programs, and actually the charging stations are being paid for frequently by the charging station people who put that in for them and make it all part of possible to, once again, what Tom was talking about, the range anxiety can kind of diminish in a lot of different ways. If you do live in a complex that doesn't have a charging station, you can go to a mall, get your car charged, buy your groceries, buy your clothes, whatever, and then go on to the next level with your car filled with electricity. It's a future that we're going to be looking at.
Absolutely. And we're also seeing a lot of large employers. Take, for instance, ADP, who's a large employer here in the state of New Jersey, installing public charging in their parking lots for their employees. It's a great perk. It's a way to retain top talent, and it's the right thing to do. And for people that live in these multifamily dwellings, if they can charge at work, well, then that's just as good as if they had it in their own home garage. Because when they arrive to work, they plug in and they charge. And as we talked about before, they don't have to do it every day. Once every 4 or 5 days will be enough. Just like you go to a gas station every 4 or 5 days, you won't have to plug in your car every night. Now, if you are lucky enough to have a garage and have your own charger at home, many people just do top off every night anyway. It doesn't hurt the battery. And you always know you're leaving the next day with a completely charged battery. I like to compare it to, it's almost as if, if you have a gas car and every night your car wakes up and drives itself to a gas station and tops off the tank and then drives back into your garage, and you wake up in the morning and you're on full every day. That's kind of what it's like with an electric car. It takes about 4 or 5 seconds to plug it in when you arrive home, and then every day that you leave in the morning, it's fully charged.
Well, our phones are the same way. I mean, we've gotten used to that. We all come home at work, plug our phones in. The next day we have a full charge on our telephone. We don't need to do that every day, but we do.
Sure, and that's one of the things that people always seem to, and I understand this. If you've never driven an electric car, people complain that, well, they take so long to charge. And the fact of the matter is, you don't plug your car in and sit there and wait for it to charge. Do you plug your cell phone in and like stand in front of it and stare at it and wait for it to charge? No, you go to work, you plug it in and it's charging, or you come home at night, you plug it in and it's charging. You do that with your electric car. You're not waiting. Now, granted, on long road trips, you're going to go 500-600 miles. You're going to have to stop and plug the car in. But as Assemblyman Benson said before, We talked about Electrify America, which was born out of the Volkswagen diesel scandal, diesel cheating scandal, which federal judge ordered Volkswagen to pay $2 billion invest in high-speed electric vehicle charging and education. They're building out a nationwide network so that long-distance travel in an electric car is possible. They're almost halfway done with it. There's coast-to-coast travel is already available on the Electrify America network. So you say, well, how fast is this high-speed charging? Basically, some electric cars, because every electric car can charge at a different rate, in 10 to 15 minutes, you can get 200 miles of range. So that's nearly as quick as filling up a gas station at a gas station is. So it's these super high-speed public DC fast chargers will enable long-distance travel with almost no inconvenience. You pull up, you plug in. There's always a convenience store or a business there where you walk in. Maybe you use the restroom. I don't know about you, but when I drive for 3 or 4 hours, 250 miles, I've got to use the restroom. So I drive, plug in, walk in, use the restroom, come out with a cup of coffee, unplug your car, and you're good for another 250 miles. That's how fast these high-speed chargers charge. It's not hours, it's minutes, and you're ready to go. So, this is not where we were at 4 or 5 years ago when Bill and I were talking about infrastructure. What's happened in the last 3 or 4 years is incredible. And these charging stations that the state's installing now around the state charge cars at an incredibly fast rate. They return anywhere between 10 and 20 miles of range every minute it's plugged in. So this isn't hours, it's minutes, and it's almost as fast as gas. Electric vehicles aren't the future. They're the present. They're here and they're ready now.
When we're talking to Assemblyman Benson about the state leadership on this, and they're doing a great job on the state leadership, KMM has been very active in terms of municipal ordinances, which are also being passed throughout the state. The Assemblyman represents towns in Middlesex County that are passing ordinances on a regular basis that any new construction or any kind of development that's going to occur, either retail of any certain size or even residential complexes, that part of the component of approval for the planning boards has electric vehicle charging stations into the system. So I think it's not just state leadership, it's on a down in your local one-on-one level in your municipality, they're working on that.
Yeah, and I just want to add, I know DEP is working with the League of Municipalities and with groups like Sustainable Jersey to make sure they can create some model ordinances. Because if you talk to Electrify New Jersey, ChargePoint, all the other different groups that are trying to put in stations, the number one barrier that they're running into is they'll come into a town, they find a great location, but there is no ordinance dealing with it. So they almost always have to go get a variance. And particularly with COVID and other times, they have seen the longest lead time just to get a simple thing installed. And so getting those model ordinances out and adopted, I think is key. I think we need to work with the League of Municipalities to talk about whether to make mandatory that every municipality at least adopts something. They should still pick it, because I'm a home rule guy, I'm a former councilman and freeholder, but I believe every town should choose what's right for them, but they should have something. And at a minimum, you want those to be considered as inherently beneficial use, or even better, as an accessory use. In that case, you could just be able to do it as an administrative action, as long as it's part of that zoning ordinance. So there are a lot more we can do, and thankfully DEP is ahead of the curve and working with League of Municipalities. I think you're going to see in the next year or two the ability for us to really proliferate throughout the rest of the states, so that no matter where you're going to put a station, whoever that developer is going to come in, know the rules of the road, and get it done hopefully within 45 days or less. In other states, this is getting done in 20 days. In our state, it can take more than 90 days and longer, just because nobody's done it before. And so we got to get this to be a routine thing, and it shouldn't matter what the zip code is. The experience should be almost the same. Again, with a little bit of changes there based on whatever town would like to see.
Assemblyman, keep Middlesex moving, working with the 25 municipalities in Middlesex County, has the template. We've worked with various towns, North Brunswick, East Brunswick, and various times to encourage these type of programs. With your leadership and our cooperation, I think we can take it beyond the League of Municipalities and actually go to the towns, because League of Municipalities represents so many towns. we can kind of shrink it down to trying to help you get these kind of programs, because I think it's important for the municipalities to look at the cost-effective benefit of doing this. Because you're right, is if it's coming down the road, which is, I agree with Tom, it's already down the road. It's far past the beginning of this road. For a municipality all of a sudden to decide they want to have these ordinances to prohibit any type of new development, they're going to have to see that the future is to make sure this new development meets the future. And I think this type of future is going to be electric vehicle charging stations every place you go. You don't go far in New Jersey without seeing a gas station. We know that. I mean, because gas stations has been the 20th century. We're talking 21st century.
Yeah, and in most cases, it's not that there's ordinances against these things. It's just that there's no experience with it. And so when you don't have a template already there, they don't know what to do with it. And so it ends up being drawn out as they ask for additional information that's probably not needed in most cases for them to get that comfort level. And that delays things out multiple meetings and multiple months
and multiple dollars.
And absolutely.
Developers' time is money. We all know that.
And we could have gotten 3 probably stations built for the price of 1 in that case. And so we have limited resources. We want to make sure we do them efficiently. We still want to give power to local officials to handle it. But can you imagine if some of these things, particularly if it's in a site like a retail establishment or in a community development, you could really take care of this, should be through just pure administrative side of it without having to have a hearing on this and other things. Now, if it's part of a larger new development, sure, but make that part of that whole process rather than something that's an adjunct to it, and just make it so much easier. So the more we get into this, it's going to be a lot easier. It shouldn't be anything like putting a new gas station at the end of the corner. This is not hard. It's about running the right voltage of wires, making sure you have the right setbacks and distances. And once you have that all set, you meet the electrical code and the fire code, as long as you do that and the administrators are able to, the zoning administrator, officer is able to confirm that, this should just move very quickly. So part of this is education. We got to get that out there. And groups like Keep Middlesex Moving is the right place for that, particularly at the municipal level, because you have that comfort level in the relationship.
Well, thank you so much. So I want to give you both an opportunity to wrap this up, because you've done such a comprehensive job of discussing how complicated some of these things can be, but as we look into the future, how simple it can actually be. When people start looking at electric vehicles, the obvious thing is it's a good choice. It's a good decision to make, but people have to get over some hurdles. So Tom, I'll let you finish up and then we'll wrap it up with the Assemblyman.
Sure, and thanks for the opportunity. I just would like to encourage everybody to just go out and test drive an electric car. Whether you're looking for a vehicle now or not, visit a local dealer. There's great at Chevy dealerships, the Chevy Bolt, the Hyundai Kona electric, there's Teslas, there's the Kia Niro, there's plenty of cars. And coming up, the Mustang Mach-E, which is really going to be a fantastic crossover from Ford, all electric, fun car. There's so many electric cars available. Go take one for a test drive. And then take a look at the incentives between what the state just passed, as the Assemblyman mentioned before, up to $5,000 on cash on the hood of the car. There's a $7,500 federal tax credit. There's a sales tax exemption in the state of New Jersey. You can get $16,000, $17,000 savings on a new electric car. And then once you own it, it costs half as much to fuel and about a quarter to a third as much for maintenance. So over the lifetime of the car, you own it for 4 or 5 years. Even if you paid $2,000 or $3,000 more up front, you're going to be ahead $3,000 or $4,000. Go for a test drive an electric car, consider one, and I think you'll be happy with the results.
Thank you, Tom. Assemblyman?
Yeah, and I think Tom really hit it nail on the head. Like, if you're about to be a first-time EV buyer, look, are you a person that drives just for errands at this point? Or are you a commuter? See what your distance is. You may not have to get top of the line, 200-mile range. Get the car that fits for you. If it's your only car and you take long drives on a regular occasion, you may want to splurge out. If you're a luxury driver and you want to get an EV, there are plenty of luxury options. So just, do your education just like you would for any other car. And if we're going to really, get the benefits from this EV world we are entering into now, What we've mostly talked about so far is really about consumer vehicles. We're going to see that transition also into medium and heavy duty vehicles as well. We're already doing a pilot through New Jersey Transit as a state in Camden for a number of New Jersey Transit buses. And in their long-term capital plans, there already is plans to purchase even more. And if that works, the other area where we really have to look into, and Assemblywoman Nancy Pinkin really has been leading the way in this, is the largest fleet vehicle of transportation, of mass transit that we have in the state. You would never really think about it this way because it's owned by over 600 different districts, but we're talking about school buses. School buses are on very set, short routes, much like a lot of our transit buses. And we often don't think about that, but if we get those electric, you get a lot of very localized environmental benefits, that lowered maintenance costs, and again, that cleaner air, particularly where where we want to see it most, around our children. And so as we're seeing this kind of revolution among consumer cars, we're already thinking ahead to make sure we can get there with our heavy duty, our buses, and that requires some foresight for incentives for recharging infrastructure, because it's a little bit different for fleets. Not much, but a little bit more different. And then we can start talking about even greater benefits, such as microgrids in using for the same infrastructure when we have those fleet vehicles. So again, we're just talking about the tip of the iceberg with consumer vehicles. There's so much more we can talk about as we go into even a full EV economy.
Well, thank you so much. I think we always talk about both of you gentlemen as being visionaries. Visionaries are not really only long-term visions. We're looking at really the short term. This is occurring in the near future. It's occurring now as we're moving ahead. People won't necessarily recognize 20 years from now how this seemed like something we had to convince people to do, because I think you both are on the right track. And I think America, and New Jersey especially, is going to look at these type of programs that we have in place and the type of vehicles that we're going to be using, that we will be a leader. I mean, certain parts of California, New Jersey, all those type of places can understand that cleaner air is better for not only for reducing costs for vehicles, reducing medical costs, reducing all the different side effects of the bad air that we have to breathe every day. So I want to thank you both for joining us. I really appreciate you taking the time. I think KMM is there to help you and work with you and do whatever we can in the future. Our staff is really first rate. Although we're working from home, we're still working, and we're still there to help you in all your ways. So thank you so much. And now comes a really complicated part about what to do with these type of things, is how to say goodbye, okay? Every one of these Zoom meetings we have, you never know exactly when to say, thank you so much, and thank you for joining us, and goodbye, okay? Take care.
Have a great night, everyone.
Bye-bye.